guys, it's Emma. So today I have something a bit different. It's something I've been wanting to do for quite a while. I've been wanting to start, a series or a section where I talk about writing and just the craft of writing and things to do with the writing industry in general. So finally I'm gonna put up a video that deals with something kind of like that. So this one is about letting your characters write the story as opposed to letting the plot write the story. So I will explain what I mean by that. Letting your characters write the story basically means the choices and the personality of the characters should be the main driving force in the story, as opposed to external forces such as just the plot line that you've chosen. That's not to say that there shouldn't be any external forces. There should definitely be a balance between the internal and external forces that go on in your story. By that I mean, you have a character who is given a decision to make about something. They could choose one thing or another thing, and depending on what they choose, well, that depends on them as a person. So that is an internal force, and then an external force is something your character has no control over whatsoever, such as the country declaring war or something. And the reason I think this is so important is because I've read a few books now that have had a really cool plot line, like really interesting, really creepy premise for the whole story, but the characters have been crap. Like, I've hated them, or I didn't give a crap about them, or I just didn't like them in general, but I liked the plot line. The plot was awesome, but the characters sucked, basically. I think that's kind of the opposite way that one should create a story, in my opinion. For example, the Mara Dyer trilogy. Really cool plot line, like really awesome premise for the whole series. You have this girl who was in a traumatic accident, and afterwards she's experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder and like weird hallucinations, and just weird crazy things are happening in her life, and you're not sure if it's supernatural or what is it, so it's kind of big mystery, big creepy thing going on. So I thought that was a really cool premise for Mara Dyer, but I read the entire trilogy and I didn't care for any of the characters at all. I didn't like any of the characters. I was just like, whatever. I didn't feel anything for them. It completely failed to make me emotionally invested in anything that was going on. But I liked the story, I liked the plot, so that there is an example of a disconnect that I've witnessed between the characters and the plot line. And of course, this all greatly depends on what point of view you choose. For example, the Raven Boys series, I haven't finished it yet, but I've read the first 2 books, and it is in third person, limited omniscient, or I guess omniscient, I don't know, you get quite a few perspectives from most of the characters in it. But if it had only been from Blue's perspective, I probably would have hated it, because Blue, I don't particularly, she's one of the characters in the Raven Boys, and I'm not particularly interested in her a whole lot. So I was very glad when I was reading the Raven Boys that it was third person omniscient, because it went back and forth between a bunch of different characters. And they seem to have their own way of dealing with things in the story, and that kind of drove everything forward. So the point of view you choose for your story is also very key to how the story will be told, and that's another idea for a video I have for another day. I'll get into more detail about that some other time. But point of view does play a role in it. A great example of the point of view used very well and the characters telling the stories and writing the stories themselves is Gone Girl. You have 2 dual perspectives, both first person, from Nick and Amy, and they are very separate, different people, and the choices they make and the things, their desires that they have totally drives the entire story forward. It's what makes the story what it is. So that's a very good example of the characters writing the story as opposed to the plot. So the reason it is very key, I think, to have the characters write the story as opposed to having an awesome plot line is because, for one thing, it lets you discover a story that maybe you hadn't thought of. If you are suddenly writing a scene and you have this character that is in the scene doing something, whatever, and suddenly you get this idea that, oh, this character, I feel like this is what they would do right now. Then you put that in, and suddenly that leads to something else, and suddenly you're in this whole other part of your story that you never thought you'd be in, or didn't even, imagine before. Whereas if you just solely focus on the plot line and you plan everything out down to the last detail, this is what's going to happen, I want this to happen exactly, then you're not leaving any room for much imagination with the characters themselves. And the characters are so important because they're real people, they're real people who make decisions, and they have their own desires and wants and needs and goals, and they really are the driving force within any story. I mean, you can have external things getting thrown at your characters, like things that are out of their control. But when it comes down to it, I feel like characters really have the final say in how the story should go, because after all, it's their story. Secondly, if you have your characters write the story, more so than a great plot line, the reader becomes more emotionally invested in the characters, and the risk is higher because the characters are responsible for their actions and the choices they make. So if they are the ones who are creating the drama and creating the plot, basically, then there's more pressure on them to have a good outcome. So I hope that makes sense. For example, if you have a character who has to make a really tough decision, and first of all, it's exciting if you don't know what decision they're going to make. And secondly, when they do make the decision, both decisions should have consequences, should lead to like a cause and effect thing in the plot where it just rolls on, and, it creates the plot, it drives everything forward. So if there's that kind of pressure and risk involved with the character making decisions and certain choices and whatnot, then the reader becomes more invested in that character because of the choices they make versus the ones they don't make. Maybe they'll end up hating them for making a certain choice, or they'll end up loving them, or or rooting for them, or whatever, or even relating to them. That's always a very good plus to have in your stories. So yeah, I hope that made sense. I don't know, something I've thought about, been thinking about it quite a lot from different stories I've read, that I finished reading them and thought, well, that was an awesome plot line, but I hated all the characters and they were horribly constructed. So it was kind of good, but not really. So I don't know, it's kind of a hard balance between the external and internal forces and planning ahead as well, but not planning ahead too much because then you limit yourself. I know, I've done that before. Like the story I'm writing now, I know where I want to go with it, but there's this one character who I didn't really know what her deal was, I don't know what her purpose really was in the story, or what to really do with her. And then as I was writing it, I kind of figured out, okay, now I know, this is her, this is what she's going to be like, this is what she's going to do, and this is the decision she's going to make, which is going to affect this down the road, and, So I think if you kind of open your imagination a bit when writing, and take into account more so the characters, and really spend time with them in your mind to get to know them better, then you'll be able to write a really good story, because you'll know your characters so well that when you finish the story, it'll make sense why the characters did what they did, and also they created their own problems and they solved their own problems, and I don't know, I think that's fairly important when writing a story. I'm not saying to forget about the plot entirely and don't plan anything and don't have a goal in mind when you're writing it, because I'm reading a book right now where I feel like the plot has been completely forgotten and it's just these characters going on and on about nothing. And I really hate it right now. It's taking me forever to finish, and I will talk about it in a review when I finally finish it, and I will link it here when it's done. But yeah, there is no plot really, and the characters, they're very well defined, but they're not doing anything. So there has to be a balance between the plot and characters. I think I've said all I need to say. I hope that made sense. Yeah, please let me know what you think below, if you agree, disagree, or whatever, and your experiences with writing a story. If you've run into this problem, or even in your reading if you've noticed this before. I feel like it's more so popular in YA fiction because the characters I find in young adult novels are so one-dimensional and just so bland, but there's a lot of cool plot lines in YA fiction. So, if they could get that balance right, I think YA fiction would be awesome, like really awesome. And I know a lot of you probably already really love YA fiction, that's cool. But for me, I want less shallow, one-dimensional characters and more in-depth, character-driven plots in YA, and just any story really. I think every reader should want that, because to me, that's what makes the most exciting story. Yeah. So anyway, that's my opinion. If you agree, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool. Whatever. Please let me know what you think below, and thanks for watching.